We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. Lindsay Patterson, Mike Santagata here. Mike, what's up?
Not much. Um, yeah, I just so what's weird for me is I feel like I'm this isn't like a what's up thing,
Yeah,
but I really like the games on Saturday and Sunday. I had a really good time,
I
and I
do too.
feel like yeah, great games. The only one that wasn't a good game was that Ravens one.
And I thought it was going to be after the first
Yeah,
half,
they both did. Poor Bills, yeah. Well, that too. But um, yeah, I had a really good time watching the games, and I just feel like I don't know if people enjoy football anymore because I go on Twitter and it's all about like,
It's
what does this mean for Josh Allen's ranking in the quarterback pantheon, and like, oh, Jared Goff's not throwing the ball downfield. He's not actually good. Who cares? Who cares, man? Like,
let's start out with the Saturday games, and we'll get to Sunday, and then we'll kind of give a little, hey, these are the matchups, but we'll do predictions later in the week. Saturday's game, watching it at first, when you look at the Texans and the Baltimore Ravens game, it when you play the Baltimore Ravens, maybe it's because we see them 2 times a year. You only get so many possessions. It's not gonna be a lot of back and forth. They are gonna be able to drain the clock. They obviously have a threat at quarterback in Lamar Jackson, what he's able to do on in the air and on the ground. And they weren't going to get those opportunities in the second half. And it was almost a point where you've got to score a touchdown now. You cannot go 3-and-out. You can't settle for a field goal. But early on, it felt like the Texans defense was putting pressure on them. Yes, they were the number one seed. They haven't played for a couple weeks, and I'm sure that could be a little bit of a factor. But I thought, you know what? They can take advantage of this. But at the same time, that Baltimore Ravens defense, it might lead them to the Super Bowl champion. Or they might win the Lombardi. They're 2 wins away, so it's not really going out on a limb here, but their defense is legit. That matchup versus Kansas City will be something, but I think, just watching them, the players they have on that side of the ball, they made it really difficult for CJ Stroud, and it was almost like, oh, okay, this is going to be different. This team is going to be tough to beat for any of the teams left in the playoffs. But what were some of your takeaways in that game?
I mean, I thought both sides of the Ravens were pretty dominant. Yeah, it was tough. They definitely on that defensive side made things real tough for that Texans offense. Something
Mhm.
I thought was interesting: the Texans tried to go heavy the entire game, 12 personnel, 13 personnel, 2 tight ends, 3 tight ends, whatever. And they have a fullback too they'll use. So they brought in some 21 type of personnel. Just we're gonna go heavy. It forced the Ravens to try to get out of this nickel. They didn't leave nickel. They didn't leave nickel. They didn't even bother leaving too high either, and they still stopped the run. So once that's happening, if that's what's happening, and this happens to the Bengals against the Ravens too. You
Yeah.
can't run the ball despite whatever you're trying. Now the Bengals don't go heavy, not often at least. They don't. If they do, it's 12 personnel, maybe an extra offensive lineman, but they're not able to run the ball that well either against the Ravens. But they're usually spread out, and they actually were running the ball pretty well against them the last time before Burrow
Oh,
went down. But I mean, once that happens to you as an offense, I feel like you're kind of done for
yeah.
outside of a quarterback having like a Tom Brady, Peyton Manning type of game where he's just going to make the right decision. And Joe Burrow's done it too. Just make the right decision the entire way down the field and just slowly carve them up because they're taking away your explosive plays. When
Mhm.
you can't get them out of that shell coverage, they're going to take away all your explosives outside of creating something crazy, which Stroud did a few times.
Yeah.
They're going to take that away. So what do you have as a passing offense? It has to turn into, and you can't just stick in quick game because then they'll start jumping things. But can you just 5 yards, 7 yards, 6 yards, 5 yards, 5 yards, 6 yards, like the entire way down the field?
Mhm.
And can you do that and keep up with an offense that is scoring a lot? But that's what becomes difficult too when their defense wasn't giving them very many opportunities either. They tried to blitz the Ravens quite a bit, but the Ravens at first I felt like didn't do well, but then they found the answers and it yeah. That was a very dominant performance. Now, the thing about the color of the logo for the Super Bowl is the color on the bottom has won each time. Nobody's mentioned this because orange was on top, blue on bottom, or yellow, whatever it was, for the Bengals Rams, and then
Yeah.
it was green on top, red on bottom for Eagles Chiefs. So this one is purple on bottom.
Oh.
I know. Just
Oh.
prepare yourself. The script hasn't lied yet.
Well, I can say I do think that the next one has a little bit of orange in it. But
They
man,
already have it out.
maybe it's just social
People aren't
media.
freaking out about this.
Maybe it's just Photoshop. But I will just say right now that would be painful, and we'll get to all of that. And I know everybody feels a certain way, and I know you can feel so. It absolutely is the worst case scenario of an AFC Championship game. But we'll get to all of that, and it should be a good matchup. I don't know. I don't want to get too much into the preview, but Kansas City. I will say this about Kansas City: their offense looks different so far the last few weeks than it did during regular season. And Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. Travis Kelce, getting him involved was absolutely huge. It felt like a different kind of year for him. I just don't know if they're going to be able to match up with that Ravens defense. And they haven't seen each other that much, over the last few years. Or well, I guess they did see each other in the postseason, but once.
Man, have they? I'm gonna
Maybe. And
if
obviously,
they matched up, it was at a time when I feel like it was two completely different teams because they haven't matched up the past couple years in the postseason.
yeah.
And the Chiefs are a different team now than they were even a little bit. No, this looks like their first postseason matchup.
That's wild. But yeah, I'll just say right now, I mean, I'm not gonna give my prediction I'm not gonna give too much away, but I don't know. I just don't think that this is a different kind of Chiefs team overall. And Baltimore Ravens, they're the number one team in the NFL. They just are. And it honestly would be a disappointment if you're the Baltimore Ravens and you don't win it all because you are so talented on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is also just I don't know. It's so hard to win it all. If they make it there, I feel like it's fine. But yeah, if they are the favorite, I think
They demolished two of the teams they would play in the Super Bowl.
I just the Texans were probably the easiest team in the playoff. Well, the Bucks weren't. They were 8-9.
Scrappy.
So they're scrappy. I mean, the Texans are also a good team. Chiefs in the playoffs, a little different. So
all right. I hope that's honestly.
I feel like if you lose to the Chiefs at any point in the playoff, well, not any point, but in like an AFC Championship game, I don't know, because if I was the Bengals and they were the number one seed and they hosted the Chiefs, I don't know if I'd go as far to say it was a failure that they didn't beat them and make the Super Bowl, just because they've been such a dynamic. It's like whenever in the 2000s, if you hosted the Patriots in the championship game and you lost, is that really a failure? Maybe. I think the Chargers considered it one. Didn't they fire Schottenheimer after that happened to him?
Yeah, but what if you're the Cincinnati Bengals who have had success against them and you feel like you can match even with the Tyreek Hill? The year they had Tyreek Hill, the Cincinnati Bengals beat them to go to the Super Bowl. And credit to Patrick Mahomes. Like I said before, I think he is a different animal when it comes to playoffs. When it is postseason, even though most of his receivers let him down, you have Rice, who is emerging and going to be a star receiver for him for years to come. Travis Kelce was a big deal in that game. Obviously, he's always going to be a Hall of Fame tight end. I like Pacheco, but I don't know if they're going to be able to run the ball. I'm not trying to get too much into this matchup, but for me personally, sitting here recording this on a Monday, it is really hard for me to take the Chiefs in that game, just with the way the Baltimore Ravens have been playing. But I agree with you. I guess when you look at the remaining teams in the AFC, and when you think of who Baltimore would have matched up with, the Bills, they deal with a lot of injuries on the defensive side of the ball. It could have been a shootout.
That's got to be one of the biggest takeaways is just like be healthy, right? Like who are the major injuries for the Chiefs, Bills, or the Chiefs? Sorry, not the Bills had plenty. The Chiefs, Ravens, Lions, and 49ers.
Tooney is one to watch.
Yeah, but I meant like going into going into the playoffs. I mean, Tony and Sky Moore being out probably helped the Chiefs. So
yeah, he was an MVP for the Bills for Tony even being on the other side of the ball. You're like, that guy's never getting the ball again. But
the Ravens have had injuries, but I mean,
They have, but
Lamar's healthy. You know, they've a lot of their main pieces are healthy. It's not.
Roquan on the other side of the ball. They're one of
Yeah, I was trying to think of the secondary. I know Marlon Humphrey was injured going into that game. I don't
their
remember.
backup is just as good.
Yeah, so they're doing a good job overcoming the injuries. But when I look at some of those teams, I've thought about this ever since I learned like when the Chiefs and Bucks matched up.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was the Chiefs and Bucks
Yeah.
going into the playoffs. They were the two healthiest teams. Now the Chiefs got injured through the playoffs, I believe,
The
and
O-line.
the Bucks won, and they were the most healthy team in the league. It's kind of like in my mind that almost changed it into, you know, we talk all this about all these different ways of like what can they do to put themselves over the top? You know, they keep getting near it, but not winning. It's like be healthy. The Chiefs and Bengals, or the Rams and Bengals, when they played, they were the two healthiest teams, pretty, I think. So,
Yeah.
or at least top five. So, like, you're not facing these major injuries. That's why when we talk about like backup quarterback, it's like your quarterback goes down, you're not winning the Super Bowl.
You're not.
The Eagles did, but
That's so different, you know.
most teams, like 99% of teams, won't,
Yeah.
even if they are a great team. So, yeah. Anyway,
I'll leave. I kind of flipped all over the divisional round week and previewed a little too much of the AFC Championship, which we'll get to all that later this week. And I'm actually excited to talk about that matchup, even though it's not the best case scenario for Bengals fans. But we will stay on Saturday's games. I agree with you. After being kind of an underwhelming wild card weekend, pretty much only getting one or two good games, we finally got 3 out of 4. I'll take it every day of the week when I just want to watch playoff football. You look at the game on right after. Oh my gosh, I'm losing my train of thought on who even played on Saturday night. Oh, Packers and the Niners.
Packers, 49ers, yeah.
One of the best games of the playoff weekend. And honestly, if you are the Packers, I know they were going in playing with house money, but if you watch that game, there were so many opportunities to put the game away. And to lose that game, even though it was the number 1 seed against the 49ers, there's a whole breakdown of that game. It was absolutely insane. One of my favorite divisional round games. And I feel like divisional round is one of my favorite playoff weekends. And it really was.
It might be the best weekend.
It
when
might
the
be.
football's good. Yeah. Especially, Sunday was back-to-back great games. But, yeah, when you're watching 49ers Packers, it was weird. I felt like that weather with Brock Purdy's inability to kind of play well in the rain, it really gave the Packers a chance to ruin everything. And even though the Packers, they wouldn't be favored next week, they shouldn't have been there. You know, like you'll hear that with being a 7 seed. And they're just young, inexperienced. That was kind of a shot. If I was a Packers fan, man, it's hard to be upset on the way like that game went. That game went in San Francisco, but when you get that close, that's how I feel like it hurts you as a fan, because you if I was a Packers fan going to that game, I'm like, we're gonna lose. Yeah, they'll lose. Who cares? Like, hopefully it's competitive. And then for it to be that competitive and that close, that's where, oh man, even though I thought they'd lose, I didn't think this would happen. I thought, I thought they even had a chance to win it and go to an NFC Championship game. And Packers fans know how hard it is to get to the NFC Championship game and get to the Super Bowl. I mean, Rodgers made it to 1 Super Bowl, and he's a great quarterback. So stinks, but yeah.
The 49ers, I mean, best team over. I wouldn't say the best team in football just because we've watched them a couple of times, Phil. I mean, goodness, you look at them in the AFC North matchups, it's absolutely crazy to see how that worked out. The Baltimore Ravens, the Cincinnati Bengals, they even lost to the Cleveland Browns. So just overall, they're going to get that home field game, and they're going to play the Detroit Lions. And I want to talk a little bit about Sunday's games. There's a lot of reaction right now about Josh Allen. I want to connect it to Joe Burrow because I do think it's a little wild and crazy. But we'll talk about that next on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. Sunday games, 3:00 kick, the 6:30 kick. Absolutely beautiful. I loved everything about it. It's over just in time. You get some afternoon football. Who's going to the NFC, AFC Championship, and the Lions and the Bucks. Same thing for the Bucks. It felt like they were kind of the house money team. Baker Mayfield earned him some money. I think he's going to be with the Bucks. Good for him. the way that they were able to play. They had missed opportunities. I feel like a lot of his receivers drop a lot of the footballs. And yes, he made that mistake of throwing the interception at the end, but at the same time, it was a really fun matchup and obviously a big deal for the Detroit Lions fans. They're going to the NFC Championship game. I think that they can give the Niners a test on NFC Championship weekend, even on the road. Obviously going to be on the road for Jared Goff and the Lions, but I think it'll be a good matchup. We'll get to that preview later this week. But overall in that game, what did you think about the Detroit Lions?
I thought the offense struggled a little bit more than I thought they would going into the game. I feel like it got better as it went. But I remember early on, I was thinking, they did the thing I hate. They took the ball after winning the toss and then went 3 and out. Right? What?
Did the Texans do that too?
I don't remember if the Texans did it. I know that the Lions won the toss and took the ball and then went 3 and out immediately.
Never.
And it was just, and then Baker threw a pick, so like it didn't matter too much. Yeah. But that's what I hate. And then the Bucs got back in that game because they went down the field with 2 minutes left, scored that touchdown, got the ball back. And it's like, yeah, that's why you kick. That's why you defer. Sorry, you don't kick. That's the stupidest thing. Everybody man, this is just a sidebar. Everybody was complaining like stupidest rule in sports about the touchback thing. This real stupidest rule in sports is that if you say kick instead of defer, you have to kick both halves. You have to kick to start the game and kick after halftime. That's the stupidest rule. Get rid of that. Nobody would ever choose that.
No, that's true. No, I agree. And we'll get to the other rules that'll probably change going into the offseason. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. The NFC just feels so different from what we see in the AFC when it comes to quarterback play and just overall. Not even trying to be a downer on Brock Purdy or anything like that and Jared Goff, but I don't know. We'll see what this matchup looks like. But the Lions are moving on to the NFC Championship game. Any remaining thoughts on the NFC?
Yeah. So let's see. I think it was awesome to see the Lions offensive line work like that. I think that Penei Sewell sure looks awesome.
He does.
Every time this happens, like what a debate between two what looks like right now future Hall of Famers.
Could you imagine if both get in the Hall of Fame?
Same class. That'd be fun.
That would be kind of cool. I feel like both teams made the correct decision. I truly do. I always feel like Jamar Chase, they don't go to the Super Bowl without Jamar Chase. I know it's so easy to point to those last few seconds of having an offensive lineman, but I think it worked out for both.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And the Lions have made the most of having Sewell, which is really cool. I think that to go with all that, I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs is already pretty cool, pretty awesome.
You called that.
Yeah, well, I was in between on it. I don't know if I called it.
I think you were really high on Gibbs because we did so many draft pods.
I was all right on Gibbs. My biggest issue with Gibbs, I think, was he couldn't really pass protect. Now he does. So credit to whoever the Lions running back coach is and Gibbs for getting better at it. And then I felt like he wasn't a guy that you could really pound up the middle a lot, and the Lions don't care. They don't do that with him. They'll do a lot of designer runs. He's kind of like when I compared him to CJ Spiller, and then some people got upset about it. It's like, no, CJ Spiller was pretty cool. He's kind of ahead of his time. Like I didn't mean this in a bad way, but yeah, I definitely had Bijan. Bijan was my guy, but they both went top 10. Yeah. Anyway, Gibbs, great. Josh Reynolds, great. Amon-Ra, great. Like they have all these guys. Jameson Williams being used interestingly now. Sam Laporta can't remember. Did he catch a touchdown or
he had like 4 catches on one drive? I remember that.
Yeah. He's good. That was what I was wrong on. I don't know. I overthought that.
Is he tied in number 1 right now?
In that draft or in general?
In the draft.
In that draft. Probably. Like, I think I'd rather have him than Kincaid. He's younger too. The only guys like we haven't seen Michael Mayer in this type of offense, and he was behind Hooper for some of the year. Like the thing with Laporta was they gave him the keys right away, and they said, "We're going to use you." That's the Lions coaching staff is what sticks out to me. Like They got Gibbs to be a good pass protector so he can play on third down. They see Laporta. He's not the best blocker, even with the Iowa helmet, which I think is what threw me off the most. But they're like, we don't need you to be. We'll use you in different ways. And it's like, not the greatest route runner. Who cares? We'll use your athleticism. We'll put you in space. You're great after the catch, right? So let's throw these little passes and let you run. Let's work you down the field because you're a good athlete. And they just find a way to maximize all these guys that they get. So that was my takeaway on that side. On the Bucs side, they put up a fight.
Yeah.
It was kind of weird. You would have called the timeout, right? Even though like no chance at you actually winning the game. But call the timeout and try.
Because you have
to. Try. Yeah. Like something weird could happen, and then you tie the game. I don't know. It's the playoffs. Like a regular season game, I could see just kind of like letting that go.
Yeah, I agree.
Even then,
you still do it. Zach Taylor.
I prefer they try. But like a playoff game, if Zach Taylor did that in a playoff game, I'd lose my mind. Just like, come on.
I would think of so many what ifs. Like, what if this would have happened? What if, But no, I agree.
And the right tackle got roasted for when he was correct in pass protection, but like people don't care. Empty pass protection, Aiden Hutchinson left unblocked because that's what Baker's hot off of. He's the furthest away from the quarterback, and they slid to the left. And then the right tackle is trying his best to check left where he sees nobody's coming into that gap. He tries to then get out to Hutchinson. So then it looks like he was doing the wrong thing, and he gets Luke Godicke, I think. Yeah, he wasn't wrong on that. Baker was wrong on that. Baker, throw the ball away. Throw the ball somewhere. You're hot. So you got to get the ball out or change the protection. Somebody could have also changed the protection and left one of the backers as the hot. But I don't know. I had a lot of thoughts in that game, but Bowles still crazy. He entered that game. Everybody thought he was going to blitz the crap out of him, and then he didn't blitz at all. And then he turned it up. It was like the first two drives, though. I think that's what threw the Lions off. When they went 3 and out the first time, I was like, Bowles didn't bring pressure. Like we thought he was going to bring some pressure on this.
I think if you're the Bucs, though, I think you're in a really good position. There's still a lot of talent. They're young. They have some decisions to make on their roster, a lot of free agents.
Well, the quarterback's the biggest thing, right? Like they'll probably pay Baker something, and that it could make or break it. Like, does Baker go back to being late stage Browns, Rams, Panthers Baker, or does he stay what he was for them this season? Like that's all I'd really care about is the Bucs. Like Mike Evans thing's huge, franchise legend. Does he walk? I don't know.
I think he comes back.
They seem like a team that wants to run it back all the time, even though this was a team that went 8-9, won a playoff game, and then lost in the divisional round. This feels so much like they're going to try to run this back. And I hope they do, because Mike Evans is a little scary if he goes to like the Chiefs.
Yeah, I don't want anything to do with that. And I do think the Chiefs will get a free agent wide receiver. I just don't know which one that is. Random fact, the Tampa Bay Bucks GM follows me on Twitter. Cool. I have no clue why.
Tell him to keep Evans.
But believe me, yesterday I was like, yeah, maybe the Bucs will pull it out. Maybe they'll be able to get it done. I agree. I think get him on the pod. But I good for Baker. I think the perfect scenario would have been Baker just winning the whole entire thing. I'm not gonna lie, taking the Bucs to the Super Bowl and winning it. That would have just been a great, funny story because nobody would have predicted it. But good for him. I'm always rooting for people to kind of see a turnaround after everything that kind of happened with him and the Cleveland Browns and bounce around a couple teams. Move on to the game that I think everybody was waiting for. Peyton Manning versus Tom Brady. Tony Romo, a comparison on CBS, and it did kind of create a little bit of a reaction. But look, you get Josh Allen, you get Patrick Mahomes, 2 games, always a good game in the divisional round. And I do look forward to that because I love the NFL. This lived up to it. I think you could look at that game plenty of times and say Josh Allen probably was the best player on the field. You look at Diggs, that pass when he goes lights out 1st and 10, you think he's going to bring it down and he doesn't because Josh Allen goes for the kill shot, knows you do not want to give the ball back to Patrick Mahomes in this game. But unfortunately, his defense failed him. His kicker went a little wide, and they lost the game, and they just can't get over the hump in the divisional round these days. What was your reaction to that game?
What a game. That was my reaction right away. I mean, like I was soft cheering for the Bills just because
Yes.
they're a tortured fan base like the Bengals,
Yeah.
but the entire time I was just like, wow, this is such a good game. Like there's so much good stuff happening here. Not always the best football. I'm thinking of the play that they let Travis Kelce go on unguarded into the end zone, but a lot of good football.
Mhm.
And then this was the one that made me have like the reaction that I did at the start of this pod. And I also said something on Twitter. It was like that game ended and it felt like everybody just wanted to talk about where Josh Allen
Yeah.
ranked.
It was
It
crazy.
was who cares? If his kicker makes the field goal and Diggs catches a good ball, like he's suddenly a top, he's right up there with Mahomes, but it doesn't happen. You can't put him higher than fourth. Who cares, man?
It
I
doesn't
don't
really
care.
matter. It
None
doesn't
of it
really
matters. None of it matters. I just thought it was a great game. I felt bad for the Bills fans, that one
matter.
that it cut to. Been there, been there where it just feels like, oh man, can't get over this. Then you do. Then it may just happen. But yeah, this did feel like the end of a mini, not like an era, but this version of the Bills team to me. Like
Mhm.
man, Diggs just looks like a shell of himself, not catching that deep ball. And,
Can't trust
Trent
him.
Sherfield had a few other ones that he should have caught. And I think Khalil Shakir might have been the best receiver of the day for them.
That
Just,
touchdown was
yeah.
insane.
The one that he caught on the right sideline, too, where he just kind of like caught it with his bicep. That was also really good.
Mhm.
Um, and then he almost had that one touchdown. People have talked a lot about like, oh, he should have just thrown the ball to Diggs underneath. He had it. It's just his left tackle ran into him, so he didn't get everything on it, which
Yeah.
I've been told that elite arm strength overcomes that. You don't need to step into those throws. You could still throw it 60 yards.
Yeah.
But I guess not. I don't know. But I respect anybody going for that shot. But yeah, I don't care that he went for the post,
No.
whatever
You
it
don't
was.
want to
Like
give
I
the
thought it
ball
was
back
the
to
right
Patrick
decision.
Mahomes.
Yeah,
You
I
don't
thought it
want
was
to
the
give
right
it back
decision.
to him. I mean,
You need to score a touchdown is the most important thing to me. Is like gotta score a touchdown here. Don't want to
yeah.
tie this up and then give the ball back. That'd be the worst situation.
You look at that game, the first matchup versus the Cincinnati Bengals and the Kansas City Chiefs. I will remember everything about that. I didn't expect the Bengals to win that day. They were losing at halftime by 11 points, and they found a way to come back in that game. Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow and this offensive staff took 6.5 minutes off the clock on that final drive because in his head, he wanted to go for the touchdown, not the field goal to tie it. And everybody was criticizing him. It ended up working out because there was penalties and they had to kick the field goal anyways. This time was going to expire, but he didn't want to give the ball back to Patrick Mahomes. That is extremely smart. The way Patrick Mahomes was pretty much dicing that defense that had a lot of injuries, and he had his way with it, and he looked like Patrick Mahomes that we've watched in the playoffs for the last 6 years, and probably what we might see in Sunday's AFC Championship game. It was a battle between two of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Absolutely devastating for Bills fans because you really do look at that roster and you think to yourself, who's coming back? I would be a little. Would you be surprised if Diggs is back?
I would not be surprised just because I I think his dead cap hit is astronomical. Like I think it's the same as his cap hit. Like if you cut him, you don't save any money, so you might as well just run it back with him, at least for next year. But I could also see them trading him because I think that does lower the cap hit for whoever acquires him. I don't know his contract in and out. I know that if there was no contract with this, I would be surprised if he was back. But with all the barriers surrounding this, uh, I wouldn't be that surprised if he ends up back there. It would be more so. It would be less about like, oh, they're just going to run it back with Diggs. It's more about like, no, we don't have another option, guys. Like we have to. Um, but yeah, it felt like the end of like Diggs is like this great up there with the Chase and Jefferson types of Adams wide receivers out there. I don't know about that anymore. So not that surprised. Von Miller looks like a disaster of a contract. I know he did something in that game, but
But
yeah,
still,
hasn't been what they wanted. And but I think at least Micah Hyde is a free
yeah,
agent.
he's a
And
free agent.
yeah, they've got a whole bunch of guys that are possibly going to leave the team. That's why I thought mini era or this version of the Bills, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
There'll still be pieces. Kincaid and Knox, I think, are both going to be there. Allen will be there, and some of that offensive line, all of that. But just the end of Diggs is like this key cog in the offense. That's a big one. So yeah, sorry to the Bills. That was it was a great game, but
there's a reason I picked Kansas City going in that game.
I mean, that was what I thought in my head.
You did. You wanted to be the person that picked the other team. It's okay.
Yeah,
but
somebody had to.
But no, there's more I want to actually talk about with these matchups kind of going forward. But let me ask you this before we get into that conversation, because you did bring up the quarterback reaction right after the game, and it is a little wild. But who do you think had the best chance of beating the Baltimore Ravens? The Bills or Kansas City?
Kansas City.
That's how I felt. So for me personally, and we'll get to previews what's going to happen on Wednesday's podcast. It pains me with all of my heart that I want Kansas City to beat the Baltimore Ravens. I can handle Patrick Mahomes being the top of the top quarterback, and even if he's able to get another Super Bowl, whatever, it really doesn't bother me anymore. If you feel like you have your franchise guy, you have your guy, you believe in your guy will take you there. I don't know if I can deal with the Baltimore Ravens Super Bowl before Joe Burrow's Super Bowl. Even though I know they have them. I know they have them. Believe me, they will remind you that they have Super Bowls. So I kind of, when I was watching that game, I kind of wanted Kansas City to win.
Oh, yeah. I guess I could see how you got there logically. I don't agree with it, but
it pains me. It did.
If Lamar wins the Super Bowl, I don't really care that. Actually, the one thing it would help is I've seen that stat about like no quarterback head coach combination has won a Super Bowl if they've been together for 5+ years or whatever. How long has Lamar been with John Harbaugh? Has it been 5 years or is it 6?
Has to be. It has to be.
Do we get to change that? Do we push it back another? Actually, I meant 6 years. I'm gonna check right now. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a 6th year. 6th year. Because I think those arbitrary things are stupid sometimes. Like if Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow don't win the Super Bowl next year, does that mean they never win one?
No, I don't believe that.
Yeah, that's where I am. Do I think that only Tony Dungy could have won that Super Bowl with Peyton Manning? No. I don't know.
So that's where I was. I know everyone's going to feel so different. At the end of the day, I just actually hope the Lions, even the 49ers, it wouldn't bother me if they won another Super Bowl because they have so many ways. So whatever, it wouldn't affect me. But the best story in the NFL would be the Lions winning it all. So I'm still kind of hoping that happens. I just don't think the NFC matchups will be good against the Baltimore Ravens or the Kansas City Chiefs. So it does feel like the AFC is going to come out strong and win the bowl no matter who they play.
Breaking news on the pod.
What?
I'm making sure this is the real Tom Pelissero. It is Brian Callahan hired by the Titans to be their next head coach.
Okay, well, we will be in our next segment talking about Brian Callahan on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. I have Mike Santagata, also known as Adam Schefter, breaking news on the podcast today. We were just going to talk.
I just got a bunch of notifications at once, and then I was like, okay, I got to check this. And then like,
know what? I will say this, and I will say this. Brian Callahan, news coming out, Tom Pelissero of NFL Network. We did check for the blue check mark. Brian Callahan.
Well, that doesn't help you. I saw 600,000 followers, so
that's true.
A fake guy.
That's
this is a fake guy.
Always click on the count. Brian Callahan, the Cincinnati Bengals offensive coordinator, it has finally happened, and I think he landed in the best possible spot when it comes to some of the interviews that he was taking. He is going to be the Tennessee Titans' next head coach. So the Bengals losing one. Zach Taylor's coaching tree is growing. Good for Brian Callahan.
And as sad as it was for Joe Burrow to get hurt, I feel like Callahan got this job because of the work they did with Jake Browning, where when you're not the play caller, but you're the offensive coordinator, I feel like it's hard to establish that you should be hired. You could think Mike McDaniel's like that, and there's other guys, but what separates you? Like, how do I know it's not just the quarterback? Well, the quarterback got hurt. The offense was awesome at times, not every time, but awesome at times. So I think that certainly contributed to this. But yeah, I think Brian's gonna be a good head coach. I've always liked. We've talked about he's too honest and open sometimes, but I think that's a good quality. To be honest, too
I
many honest in there. But yeah, I think he's smart. I think he'll make a good head coach. We'll see though. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into being a head coach.
There is. And the Cincinnati Bengals will actually face Brian Callahan on the road next year when they play the Tennessee Titans. So that'll be a fun matchup. But I agree with you. I think the opportunity really showed what he was able to do in the quarterback room. I don't think we see and appreciate all the things Brian Callahan does behind the scenes when you have guys like Zach Taylor, who's the play caller, and you get, well, he doesn't call the plays. What does he do as the offensive coordinator? Game planning, everything that goes behind the scenes. I'm sure Joe Burrow would have plenty to say about what Brian Callahan and this offensive staff has been able to do. Gets criticized a lot when it comes to this offense and being able to, when the Bengals offense is struggling, you always hear them criticize Zach Taylor, the play calling, Brian Callahan. And I don't think Brian Callahan really got enough credit while he was here. I'm really excited to see what he's able to do. The Cincinnati Bengals will now need to hire their offensive coordinator. I feel like it's going to be an internal hire with Dan Pitcher. And honestly, a hot candidate right now who's going to probably get more OC interviews. There was a report last week that he was going to interview for the New Orleans Saints offensive coordinator position. He interviewed for the Bucs last year, and a young offensive mind who's worked with Joe Burrow for a few years now. And I think that's going to be extremely helpful. Depending on what they do with Troy Walters, if he stays as a wide receiver coach, if maybe he gets interviews elsewhere. But I kind of feel like this is good news for everyone involved. Bummer that Brian Callahan's gone. I will say this because I actually would love that Brian Callahan's back. But I think when it comes to, we pretty much felt Brian was going to get the job with all of the interviews, the second interviews. He had the in-person interview with the Titans today. So that's a very quick hire. Maybe when he was there, he signed on the dotted line. There were reports he was going to meet with the Panthers for the second time this week. And the Titans probably thought, we're not going to let him leave town. But for the Cincinnati Bengals, you don't want to wait, and you could lose your internal hire as your offensive coordinator and Dan Pitcher. So they're able to probably make that move. They haven't made it official, and it hasn't been complete. Maybe they have other guys in mind, but it just feels like that's where they're leaning when it comes to his replacement. And we don't have to wait for 2 to 3 more weeks for everything to become official.
Yeah. I mean, this is good for the Bengals that he's one of the first ones hired, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because now you don't need. There was that like 1% chance of like, oh no, Pitcher took an OC job and Brian hasn't been hired yet. Then Brian gets hired, and now it's like, what do we do? This is like a very clear. What do we do? Promote Pitcher, and maybe it's Cragthorpe that becomes a quarterback coach, and then you find some assistant out there to take Cragthorpe's job. I don't know. Maybe that's not a job you need to backfill right away.
They really like him. Their internal staff, they're young offensive minds, and the Cincinnati Bengals really respect those guys in the room. So I wouldn't be surprised if everyone just gets a little bump when it comes to the staff, and to be determined on, if I don't know what the rest of the picture looks like, but I think the Bengals are in good hands when it comes to the people who are in the room when what we've watched this season with the offense, what we've watched over the last few seasons with this offense are still going to be there. You're just going to be losing a really great offensive mind in Brian Callahan, but also happy for him.
And it could help the Bengals. He might
Fresh
steal
ideas?
Bill. No, he could steal Bill. He could steal his dad from the Browns, I think.
I love everything about that because that was actually a topic of conversation from some NFL national media members. They said, well, if you're the Cleveland Browns, are you saying we're going to give you this amount of money? But if you're Bill, you're like, I have all the money in the world. They've probably been paying him pretty good money.
Unless it's promotion, they can block it. But I would also say I think they won't block it because mess with like a coach's ability to go coach with his son. That feels like the most
Cleveland Browns.
No, I wasn't going to say that. I was going to say that like you're going to lose some motivation, I think, from that coach to want to, do his best at your establishment. And the Browns were actually looking at an offensive line coach their offensive coordinator position. So I wonder if they were kind of like silently preparing for this possibility. So we'll see. no say if it happens for sure or not. But yeah, I actually also think the assistant Scott Peters, if they just promoted him, I think he's a heck of an assistant offensive line coach because I've watched some stuff from him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been with Bill a long time, so that would make a lot of sense too. But yeah, that could help though. That could help that if he steals his dad away. And
I
like
mean,
you mentioned, I did want to talk a little bit about it. I think this was the best out of the opportunities he had.
yeah.
Maybe
Don't.
depending on if that Atlanta one was real. I think there's a debate between the Falcons and Titans about which one I'd rather have.
I think there's still hope with Will, and you still have the talent around. I mean, I like some of their Derrick Henry. I want to say he's a free agent, but there's still a lot of offensive weapons. You still have some of your trenches on the defensive side of the ball. It still feels young core, and I don't know. I think if you're looking out, Atlanta, it just feels like they're going to hire a really experienced head coach, but you don't want to go to the Panthers. It's a
No,
mess.
no, that's why I said like when we talked about that earlier, it was like, yeah, unless you love Bryce Young, like that's not a job for somebody.
Yeah.
Like if you got to choose, but yeah, I think it's a good hire, and I think it'll be interesting to see him work with Levis, who I don't think has done any of the spread stuff that, in my mind, like we don't exactly know what Brian has done for the Bengals, but in my mind, he is the guy with the most history with the architecture of this spread system that the Bengals are running. So I think he put a lot of ideas into that,
Yeah.
but. Well, I don't think Levis ran that because I think in college he was running the Scangarello wide zone under center, almost Shanahan McVay type offense. And then last year they weren't running a spread system for him. So are they going to try that? Or, Brian does have experience other places. It'll be cool to see. It'll be interesting to watch. I think we now have a clear contender for T. Higgins, possible trade and or free agency next year. And
Hey, I'm not against it. I don't even want to get
that's his
into.
home state too. That's where T. Higgins grew up.
I'm
To
just
add a
saying,
second player.
I would love to send T to some team that I feel like there's still hope for him, like help for the team, that we're not sending him to the Panthers. We're not sending him to a team that is going to get 1 to 2 wins a season. I still believe in the Tennessee Titans, and I think they can put up a fight in their division. But that's a whole nother discussion as we get into the franchise tag talk, which will be happening really soon. And other things when it comes to, Joe Mixon, what the offseason looks like. But Brian Callahan, hired, according to NFL Network, as the next head coach of the Tennessee Titans. Really happy for him. And by the time we record again this week, I have a feeling the Cincinnati Bengals will be making their announcement for offensive coordinator, unless they're having a few guys in and doing some interviews. But wouldn't be surprised if that happens in the next 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they could probably promote pitcher in 10 minutes, right?
No, I'm waiting for like the press release to come through and see if there's any announcement. But I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised if that was in his contract extension last year. You're
Yeah. Yeah.
be the next one. This is why we want you back. They gave him more money to come back, and
Mhm.
I think they truly value what he's been able to do. And credit to pitcher too with what we saw from Jake Browning. I mean, he's a
For sure.
quarterback.
Yeah. 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 Because Jake Browning's quarterback, so getting him to play well was uh, awesome. And I mean, look, Peyton Manning, I think that offense and the Brady offenses in the mid 2000s, they used to be like a head coach factory. If you
Mhm.
worked for one of those two teams, you would eventually get a head coaching gig. And that could be the Bengals. If the
Yeah.
pitcher, you just put in a year or two and you might be off doing your own thing somewhere. And it's just kind of constantly churning it in and out. And that's why some people get nervous about hiring these defensive minds and these CEO head coaches, but why also the Bengals hired the offensive mind. I've seen all the thoughts about like, Zach Taylor this, Zach Taylor that. Is like, how are they going to weather this storm? This is the idea on weathering the storm. It's Zach Taylor's offense and Zach Taylor's play calling and everything to go with that. That it shouldn't be an issue. But yeah, I'm really happy for Brian. I think he'll do a good job in Tennessee. Some of that's going to come down to Will Levis, I guess. But they have a high draft pick. They've got, I think, all their draft picks and some cap space. So he'll be interesting for the rebuild. Only thing is, I don't think I would have wanted to be the head coach after Vrabel compared to being the head coach after like Arthur Smith.
Yeah, that is kind of a different. That is a little bit of a different turnaround. You're going from Vrabel to this offensive mind head coach. So we'll see what it looks like. And then I think another thing, not to, as we're wrapping this up, because this happened at the end of the podcast, one thing you have to watch out for is your offensive coordinator hire. Is he going to bring one of the Bengals coaching staff members with him?
Yeah, well, I think that we talked a ton about like pitcher. I mean, I wouldn't be that surprised if he ends up taking Walters as his offensive coordinator.
That would be another good hire. That would be
especially if Brian's going to call the plays. And that's what I thought about with Walters possibly being promoted if pitcher in Brian got hired. It's like, it's a jump for sure, like being the offensive coordinator versus the wide receiver coach, but it's not the crazy jump where not only are you being an OC for the first time, but you're also going to call plays. If Brian's going to call plays, that might be a good way to go. It could also be how he gets Bill to leave Cleveland, but I don't think.
Or you can tell Troy Walters, hey, we're going to give you a promotion, assistant offensive coordinator, wide receiver coach.
Wow. I think I'd rather be a full offensive coordinator in that situation.
Maybe I just don't like pressure. Maybe I wouldn't want to just have all the pressure being an offensive coordinator, which I would be just really cool chilling as an assistant coach. But Troy Walters is another underrated piece. And if he goes to the Titans, good for him. He really deserves it, what he's been able to do with the wide receiver group. But we'll end it here. Brian Callahan getting that head coaching job after all of these off seasons, wondering if the Bengals were going to lose a coordinator. They lost Brian Callahan first, and a season after not going to the AFC Championship game. But good for him, well deserved, and hopefully he succeeds in Tennessee. We'll have plenty to talk about later this week when it comes to maybe the offensive coordinator replacement will be official. A little preview for championship weekend and what is going to be on All Bengals.
Got a linebacker piece coming out, just haven't done it yet. Yeah, I've got all the film watched, and video's done. I just need to write it.
Make sure you check that out. All Bengals. Follow on Twitter, Bengals_Sands. You can follow me at Lindsay Patterson. Thank you for listening to It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati.